Where do we come from for Dravet syndrome? Where are we now? And where are we going to? Some words on history, then main feature, differential diagnosis, and therapeutic modalities, and the future. So, from the last century, in the 60s and 70s, a small center in Marseille entirely dedicated to the study of epilepsy, directed by Professor Henri Gastaut. And it was situated in a beautiful campaign, hosted more than 50 children, the majority for several weeks or several months, under the care of specialized educators, and a part for some days with their mother. And they were all affected by epilepsy, often severe, often associated with cognitive delay, and they needed to have an accurate diagnosis, a correct treatment, and appropriate solution for education and school. Many patients were addressed by their current doctor with a suspected diagnosis of Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, because before we have individualized this Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. But often we didn't confirm this diagnosis because they did not fulfill the criteria for Lennox-Gastaut. They had other characteristics. For example, onset in the first year of life, fever sensitivity, generalized clonic status epilepticus, presence of myoclonic seizures, of no known etiology, and photosensitivity, self-stimulation, and so on. And on this way, where the kids went from school, there was a way with some small stones where the sun reflected, and there were some children who were stimulated by the light coming from these stones, and they have myoclonic jerk, and they could also have seizures. So they were very photosensitive. Now I present my colleagues, Dr. Michel Bureau and Dr. Dara Bernardine, who have worked with me. And we observed these patients, their EEGs, their history. And at the end, we individualized this new syndrome. We named in French epilepsy myoclonic grave of the nourrisson. That was in 1978. And I published the first article in an old French review, in an article about severe epilepsies in children. Then we present that in the International Epilepsy Congress in 1991 in Kyoto. And it was named the Severe Myoclonic Epilepsy in Infancy. It was the first international publication. We presented 42 patients with this diagnosis. And after that, we wrote the chapter in the book Epileptic Syndromes in Infancy, Childhood and Adolescence. I don't know if you know this book, which has been re-edited very often, and the last edition was in 2012. And we are preparing another edition. I don't know how to. Okay. And why SMILE became Dravet syndrome? Because after the first description, many cases were reported from different countries, from Japan in particular, and some children could present the same picture but without the myoclonic seizures. And epilepsy didn't remit at adolescence and persisted in adulthood. So myoclonic and infancy were not appropriated to name this epilepsy. And the International League Against Epilepsy Commission decided to change the name, and they didn't find another name, so they decided to give my name to this epilepsy. That was in 2001. I don't know how to do. But in the same year, in 2001, Belgian doctors discovered that the etiology of this disease was due to a mutation on the SCN1A gene. They studied 7 patients, and in all the 7 patients, they found this mutation. After that, other researchers had the same type of study, but they didn't find the same mutation in all the patients with this syndrome. And after 2001, there was an explosion of researches, and particularly animal models were created. First, the mouse model, which was created in Seattle in America, and more recently another model, which is zebrafish, as you know probably. And so in the years between 1978 and 2001, it was only syndrome, severe myoclonic epilepsy of infancy. And after that, there are many researches, they are summarized here, and it became a Dravet syndrome spectrum. But there were other mutations found, but in reality, all these mutations were not encountered in many patients, only in some patients. So the main mutation is on the SN1A gene. And recently, there are other close epilepsy types were described. Before, they were considered as a special form of Dravet syndrome, but now we know there are different forms of Dravet syndrome. And for example, the epilepsy with the PCDH19 protocaderine, which exists only in girls, and another epilepsy with extreme photosensitivity, which is related to the TACD2 mutation. They are not Dravet syndrome, they are different, even with some similarities. Where are we now? So in 2001, the genetic etiology was demonstrated, and several studies confirmed the elevated predominance of the mutations on the gene SN1A, about 80%. And the development over the years of affected patients has shown that this syndrome is actually a disease with three principal aspects: epileptic, cognitive behavioral, and also motor. And the diagnosis is based on these clinical characteristics. So the typical or complete form, onset in the first year of life in a normal infant, with severe convulsive seizures, generalized or unilateral. First febrile, then afebrile. But these febrile seizures are not related to a very high temperature, only a slight change in the temperature, for example, from 37 Celsius grade to 38, not to 39 or 40. And after that, the children, the infants, present with polymorphic seizures, myoclonic seizures, atypical absence seizures, focal seizures, also special types of disturbance of consciousness who are named obtundation status, and other types of epilepsy. And they are associated with a slowing down in the psychomotor development, a motor impairment, mainly ataxia, and in spite of this symptomatology, the MRI is normal at this time. And also the first EEGs can be normal. So in the outcome, we observe seizures are pharmacoresistant. Patients are often status epilepticus. They have this motor impairment. They have the photo and pattern sensitivity. They have a mental handicap. And also, they have a high mortality rate in the first year of life, due mainly to the occurrence of SUDEP, the sudden unexplained death in epilepsy patients. You know that. It is very frequent in these patients with Dravet syndrome. These are examples of some electroclinical features. You can see here the association of generalized spike waves accompanied by myoclonic jerks. That is typical, but not all the patients can present this pattern, and there is no specific pattern for the disease. It is not like in Lennox-Gastaut syndrome or in West syndrome, where we have slow spike waves or arrhythmia. That is different. It is the association of these generalized discharges and also multifocal abnormalities, sharp waves or spike associated with the generalized discharges. Can I have the video of the first one? Look at the eyes, particularly. This patient, close her eyes, and she has myoclonic jerks after. And the second one, please. It is the same. She closes her eyes, and she doesn't have myoclonic jerk, and she continues to play. That is important because sometimes the myoclonic jerk and the spike waves are provoked by the closure of the eyes. And I think that is a part of the photosensitivity. And that is the second symptom we observed in second year of life. It is the ataxia. You can see here this girl. Can I have the first, please, video? Yes. She is very ataxic at this time. She walks, but she has gait disturbances. And 1 year later, the video is not very good because the speed is not good. But 1 year later, she is improved because the ataxia, when it exists in the young children, can improve with the years. And in other cases, it is the contrary. They are not very ataxic when they are young, and they can have more ataxia when they are adolescents, for example. Okay, we can stop the video. There are also atypical or incomplete forms. When one seizure type is not present, for example, myoclonic and atypical absent seizure are not present, or when one seizure type is prominent, they are the generalized tonic-clonic seizures. This type has been observed particularly in Japan, but we have also patients who have few myoclonic and atypical absent seizures and many generalized clonic or tonic-clonic seizures. But they are part of the same disease because they have the same type of mutation when they have researched it. Now, what is a differential diagnosis? It is not easy because we know that the SN1A mutation is not present in all the patients with Dravet syndrome and can be present in other epilepsy types, such as Guelph syndrome, focal epilepsies, or other encephalopathies. We know that the SN1A gene is one of the most involved genes in different types of epilepsy. So we can present this differential diagnosis in 3 parts in the first 2 years of life, in childhood and in adulthood. In the first 2 years of life, we can consider first the febrile seizures. When they are not Dravet syndrome, they are only febrile seizures. The onset is rather after the age of 1 year, not before 1 year. They can happen, but it is not frequent. And the patient presents only febrile seizures, not febrile seizures. The seizures are brief, and the cognitive outcome is normal in patients with only febrile seizures, but it is sometimes they can have the SN1A mutation, which is a mutation related to the fever sensitivity, for example, in the spectrum of the Guelph+. So, if the patient have the other characteristic, long seizure before the age of 1 year, not very high temperature, long seizure, so you have been cautious and prescribed rectal diazepam in case of the next seizure could be very long and could realize the status epilepticus. So it is important to give the parents the information to give rectal diazepam at the beginning of the seizure to avoid the status epilepticus. Here we have an example of seizure, a chronic seizure, yes, at 6 months after the vaccination, because vaccination can be a triggering factor for this seizure. You see the seizure started on the left side of the body, and after that there is also the involvement of the right side. It has been recorded at home, this seizure. It is the first one for this patient. And now we can have the second video, please. some months after with fever. The same patient has, it is difficult to see, excuse me, it is very dark, but it is the same type of chronic seizures with elevated temperature. We can stop the video, thank you. Another differential diagnosis is the PCDH19 related female epilepsy. They have an almost similar semiology, but with slight variations. A later onset, not around 5 months, but around 7.5 months. It is a small difference, but for the diagnosis, it is important. Seizures are repeated very often in cluster on some days, for example, and after that, they have weeks without seizures. They are often focal more than generalized. These girls are less frequently status epilepticus, less frequently myoclonic seizures, and atypical absent seizures. And the epilepsy becomes less severe in childhood. And some patients doesn't have seizure at around 10 years, for example. But they are more often autistic. And this syndrome is observed in girls without SN1A mutation, but with the PCDH19 mutation on the X chromosome. I don't have video for these patients, excuse me. And another diagnosis is progressive myoclonic epilepsies, such as neuronal ceroid lipofuscinosis, particularly in the second year, when the neurological and behavioral signs appear, and it can be eliminated by interictal myoclonus characteristic. We can see here the very, very continuous myoclonus on the different muscles and without correspondence on the EEG without spikes. The absence of visual impairment, the absence of abnormalities in the fundus of the eyes, absence of posterior evoked potentials elicited by intermittent photic stimulation low frequencies, and negative results of biological and genetic investigations for this neuronal ceroid lipofuscinosis. So we can have a doubt, but it is not very difficult to eliminate this diagnosis. A more frequent diagnosis is a focal epilepsy, because sometimes focal epilepsies can present in the first year with chronic seizures, with febrile and afebrile seizures, and the seizure can be unilateral. But the difference with Dravet syndrome, in Dravet syndrome we can have alternating unilateral seizure, once on the right side and another time on the left side. Even during the same seizure, the chronic jerks can change from side to another side. It is not the case in the focal epilepsy. And they don't have, after this period, they don't have myoclonic seizures and atypical absences, or it is very rare, and seizures become more focal. On the EEG, we have focal spikes, usually not multifocal spikes, and the condition can be normal, or they can present some specific deficit, for example, only in the language. And unfortunately, some of these patients can have also an SN1A mutation, but it is rare. And the MRI can be normal at the beginning, but it can be also abnormal. And when we have a doubt, we have to repeat the MRI different times in order to find some, for example, cortical dysplasia in these patients. And more important, this patient can be treated by carbamazepine. And we know that carbamazepine is contraindicated in Dravet syndrome because it can aggravate the myoclonic seizure. So if we have doubts, we have to avoid the treatment by carbamazepine and try to have a very precise description of the seizure. It is interesting to have the video recorded by the parents at home. That now is not relatively easy. Another diagnosis, it is epilepsy of infancy with migrating focal seizures. They have the same age at onset, before age 6 months, normal development before the onset of seizures, nearly continuous multifocal seizure. As you can see on this EEG, you have here seizure on the left side with this discharge localized. I'm not sure, but perhaps it is on the left hemisphere also. And these seizures are intractable by conventional anti-epileptic drugs, and there is a severe psychomotor delay on follow-up immediately at the time of the seizure. Not in Dravet syndrome, we have not this severe regression. They have the psychomotor delay after, during the second and third year, not immediately after the seizure. And here we have another seizure with another discharge on the EEG on the other hemisphere, as you can see here. And so the etiology of this migrating focal seizure is related to various mutations, KCNT1, TBC1, D24, but also on SN1A gene. So it is a true differential diagnosis, which is solved by the genetic analysis in some cases, not in all the cases, but mainly by the clinical and EEG presentation. Now in childhood. In childhood, we had other differential diagnoses, such as myoclonic epilepsies, other epilepsies, and also Gauss plus syndrome. So here we have example of seizure typical, the first video, please, for Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. You can see on this video a seizure with first atonic fall of the head, but associated with a tonic contraction of the upper limbs, which is very sustained with a very rapid rhythm on the EEG, as you can see here. It is brief. After that, the boy remains confused. Another seizure with exactly the same semiology. The head fall with the first spike wave, and then the tonic contraction, very slow, and after that, the confusion. The second video, please, shows you a series of brief tonic seizures recorded at home by the parents. She is a girl. You can see the slow contraction of the shoulders and of the lower limbs, very, very brief. And after that, another one recorded in the same night, very slow. It can be not observed if there is nobody who looks at the girl at this time. And that becomes obvious. It is a tonic seizures. And after that, we have recorded the same girl in our center with the EEG. And you can see here the same seizure type with a very abnormal EEG and the typical spike wave and rapid rhythms which characterize this nocturnal tonic seizure, very frequent in the Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. And another diagnosis would be the DOS syndrome, which is characterized by very brief drop attacks, atonic myoclonic seizures, and often followed by a clonic seizure. The video, please. This young boy is recorded in Paris. You have seen the drop attacks. And now the father puts him in the bed because he's afraid he falls completely. And he had this fall of the head, then of all the body, very myoclonic. And after that, he has a myoclonic discharge, continuous myoclonic jerks. And he tries to sit down again because it is not completely unconscious. And the seizure continues with frequent myoclonic jerks. Thank you. And that is different from what we observed in Dravet syndrome. We don't observe this type of seizures. More complicated are the relationships with the GEFS+ syndrome, the genetic epilepsy with febrile seizure plus. I recommend you, if you know this syndrome, to read the last paper published here, published here by the team, Australian team. Okay. This paper, which is published recently, and it is a refining of the GEFS+ syndrome. It is a family context. Several members of the same family present with febrile seizure, and febrile seizure plus, which means the febrile seizure continue after the normal age of the febrile seizure, up to the childhood, up to the adolescence also. And they can also present epilepsy, but several types of epilepsy are either generalized tonic-clonic seizures or absence or focal seizures, and rarely myoclonic aesthetic epilepsy. But the outcome usually is benign without mental impairment. These patients can have a mutation of the SN1A gene, but not very frequently, because only in 10 to 20% of the cases. In the other families, there are other types of mutation, but it is not very well explained, the role of these different mutations. The problem is that one patient with Dravet syndrome may be a member of the GEFS+ family. So when we find SN1A mutation in a patient with febrile seizures, at the beginning it is difficult knowing if it will be a Dravet syndrome or only a member of this group of epilepsies with febrile seizures and febrile seizure plus. So when the outcome is not very severe, we cannot have the diagnosis before the third or the fourth year sometimes. Okay. I think I forgot to explain that these mutations in Dravet syndrome usually are de novo. They are inherited only in around 10% of the cases. The parents are not positive for the mutation. It is different from that. In adulthood, we know there are changes in the semiology of Dravet syndrome. There are disappearance of myoclonic and absent seizures, persistence of convulsive seizures. They are apparently generalized, but they are, in reality, they are focal with secondary bilateralization. They become mainly nocturnal, and they decrease in frequency. Progressively, the frequency decreases up to 1 seizure a year, for example, in many patients after 30 years. It is not immediately, but between 30 and 40 years, there is a very true diminution of the seizure frequency. There are different publications on these patients in adulthood. And I would like to show you now the differences. The first video, please, in the semiology. For example, this man, who is 20 years at this time, 19 years, presents an obtundation status. He doesn't move. He is in this position, and he remains in this position. And his mother put him his pyjama, and after some minutes, he can help the mother to put the pyjama, and he moves his leg, but he remains globally in the same position. We can see that in some seconds. You can see the left leg up. He raises his leg. And after some long minutes, the second video, please, he presents convulsive seizures. But this convulsive seizure is not immediately generalized. You can see in some seconds a movement of the right hand and a movement of the eyes. The right hand rises up, the eyes turn to the left. It is very slow. and he has not changed his position. Now we can see the right hand, and the eyes and the head to the left. And after that, he turns to the right. He has a bilateral contraction of the upper limbs. And here is the right arm with his position, which is typically frontal. And he cries. He has a very loud cry. And after that, he turns again to the left. So it is a very typical seizure of this syndrome. At the end, it becomes bilateral as generalized. Sometimes, no, very often, these seizures are not observed at the beginning because they happen during sleep. So they are not observed by the parents at the beginning, and they see only the secondary generalization of the seizure. On the EEG, we have, during the obtundation status, this type of very slow EEG with some asymmetry, with more spikes on the left hemisphere. And here we have the beginning of the convulsive seizure on the right hemisphere, but also it continues on the left hemisphere, and it becomes bilateral. So that is typical for Dravet syndrome. There is also a change in the semiology concerning the motor impairment. There is an aggravation of motor impairment in approximately half of the patients, not in all the patients. And there is either a walking impairment with the crouch gait. This crouch gait has been described particularly in Australian series, but other patients present more with extrapyramidal signs resembling the Parkinson disease. It has been described also by Canadian authors. I show you now some video of the different types of walking impairment. That is the crouch gait. You can see the flexion of the knees and the feet, they are in a valgus, and the flexion of the trunk and the very slow walking. And on the other video, we can see the extrapyramidal symptoms. Please, the second video. He walks with very small steps. He doesn't balance the upper limbs. He has a poor expression in the face. And he walks very slowly. So it resembles something like a Parkinson, but it is not really Parkinson. She doesn't have the rest tremor we observe in the Parkinson. Okay. How to differentiate Dravet syndrome from other severe epilepsies in adult patients? Mainly Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, multifocal symptomatic epilepsies, and other severe epilepsies. We have to try to have a careful anamnesis. It is the best way allowing to recognize the typical history and mainly the onset in the first year of life. But sometimes the parents are not available for this history, and sometimes they don't remember well.
We have a lot of time, so maybe.
Okay, thank you. They don't record well the first steps of the history, so it is not easy. It is important to analyze very carefully the seizures and to have long recording, video EEG recording to capture also the seizure and the intellectual abnormalities. So when we have a possibility of this diagnosis, we can perform the genetic analysis, but we know that there is not always the mutation. These are typical seizures of the Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. We don't observe in Dravet syndrome. The first one is very brief with only opening of the eye. The second is more important, and the third one is also more important. They are recorded in the same EEG. So they are repeated. They are very brief tonic seizures. The third one, please. So it doesn't work. It is the same. Yes, it is the same type, but with more motor component. And in the other video, we can observe a nocturnal axial tonic seizure. Please, the video of the first video. You have the typical rapid rhythms on the EEG and the tonic contraction in extension of this patient who doesn't have Dravet syndrome but Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. Now, quickly, some word about the treatment. It is still disappointing. Few AEDs can actually give only a partial control of the seizures. And this epilepsy is extremely pharmacoresistant. The two first drugs are valproate and benzodiazepines. Topiramate and stiripentol are also very useful, but we can use also the bromure, the levetiracetam, and etosuximide when there are continuous myoclonic seizures. And we have also the possibility to apply the ketogenic diet, which gives some results in about 30% of the cases. I'm not convinced that vagus nerve stimulation can be useful, but some patients also can have this type of treatment. It is important to avoid in infancy and childhood carbamazepine and lamotrigine because they can aggravate the syndrome. And that is not always the case in adult patients, but in childhood and infants, yes. And now we have other perspective with trials ongoing trials for fenfluramine and for cannabis. I don't detail all these treatment because we don't have time. I think topiramate is one of the best, but don't use very high doses because there are many side effects. And the only randomized placebo-controlled trials were performed for stiripentol in 2 studies in France and in Italy. And the effect of stiripentol has been associated with that of clobazam and valproate. And it is important to use stiripentol when the patients have repeated status epilepticus because the effect is mainly on these long seizures. And it is also important to adapt the doses of the other drugs, clobazam and valproate, because there is a strong interaction between stiripentol and this drug. So sometimes the side effects can be avoided by decreasing the doses of clobazam and valproate. Other old treatment can be used. In practical, if you have stiripentol, we can use valproate, then valproate clobazam and valproate clobazam stiripentol. If the result is not enough, we can add topiramate. And when there is no possibility to use stiripentol, we can use valproate and topiramate and clobazam. And after that, we have different combination with the other drug. It is important to substitute the drug and not to add the drug to avoid the too heavy treatment, and we can use also ketogenic diet. So now some word about fenfluramine, and after that cannabis. Cannabis is more important because it is available in every country, but not as a true anti-epileptic drug. It is available only like a product from a plant grown by people. Every people can grow cannabis. But now there are different trials for this drug, and there is a synthetic article by Orin Levinsky, who is a main doctor who uses treatment. And he concluded we lack valid data, that is important, on the safety, efficacy, and dosing of artisanal preparations in the United States. But on the other hand, open label studies with some Epidiolex, which is a product produced by a pharmaceutical company, which is important because we can use it when the trials will be finished. And that is not the case now, but probably in the next month we can have this drug to help our patient. So now I have to finish because it is late. Yes. So I go quickly to the conclusion. I'm sorry, because there are many problems we have to study in the future months and years to understand better this disease. In conclusion, in 1978, the severe myoclonic epilepsy was only a syndrome. In 2007 and 18, it is an epileptic disease comprising complete and incomplete forms that realize a spectrum due to genetic alterations, mainly consisting of mutation in the SN1 gene, exceptionally in other genes. But the phenotype-genotype relationship remains unclear, and a part of the cases remain without known genetic etiology. In the future, we may hope there will be advances for the role of genetics in the outcome, new therapeutic perspectives. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Dravet. Thank you. Thank you.